Hey good people, and welcome back to the channel. It's a wonderful Saturday morning, and in just a few moments, you're going to hear my thoughts and feelings on Season 3, Episode 3 to Put a Ring on It. And in my opinion, this is probably one of the better shows that OWN has released this year because the issues that the couples are having are relatable, and it's definitely very entertaining to watch. But before we jump into things, my end of year goal is to reach 1,000 subscribers. I'm almost 3/4 the way there, so if you want to help me reach that goal, if you enjoy watching my content, and you haven't subscribed already, then feel free to hit that button because it'll help my channel grow. But without any further delay, let's jump right into the review. Episode 3 picks up with Shay discussing her feelings about Alfonso's date, as well as how she doesn't trust him. Later on, Dr. Nicole asks Alfonso if he wants to go on a second date with chubby chesticle Chantel, but Alfonso declines, and I wasn't surprised with this at all. In my last review, I noticed how Alfonso and Chantel were flirting for most of the time together, but they really never talked about anything of substance, which was a waste of Alfonso's time during this process. I also said that I couldn't see Alfonso going on more than one date with Chantel because I didn't see the connection there. Dr. Nicole sees Shay's reaction to Alfonso's decision, and she asks Shay if Shay will let Alfonso have the process. Shay replies that she will not make it easy for the next woman to date Alfonso. And this admission prompts Dr. Nicole to have a sit down with Alfonso and Shay in lieu of setting up dates for them to go on for that week. But we'll get to that meeting in a little bit. We then focus on Shorty and Kenny. Kenny discusses his date with Shemaya, and he admits that he was in a bad space mentally after his argument with Shorty earlier in that day, and that was the reason he seemed a little off during their time together. Shorty hears this, and she believes that Kenny was simply not attracted to Shemaya, which is something that I pointed out last episode. To me, Shemaya is an attractive woman, but there are different levels to this, and some guys have a certain type of woman that really does it for them. I'm talking about the type of woman that upon first sight, everything around her stops, and you can hear her own theme music playing as she's walking about. And it seems like Shemaya didn't do it for Kenny, and because of that, Kenny passes on a second date with her. And lastly, we go to Otis, who talks about his date with Shorty. He talks about how he liked talking to Shorty and how he liked that Shorty had a traditional foundation. But when Otis was asked if he wanted to go on a second date with Shorty, he passes up the opportunity. And to me, that was a shocker, because Shorty was essentially everything that Otis asked for in a woman in terms of personality. But if I were a betting man, I would say that Otis may be more physically attracted to a woman that is more physically fit and more natural looking than Shorty. And let me be clear on this. Shorty is a beautiful woman, and I would definitely date her if I were single. But in my opinion, Otis simply wasn't feeling her because of physical attraction, and that is within his right. But from the outside looking in, one of the bigger issues that I see with Otis and Charlie is that they can't get on the same page when it comes to who should lead and who should follow. Otis wants to be the leader, but Charlie pushes back so much that it causes conflict, and while relationships can remain intact under this setup, they don't seem to flourish when there are two chefs in the kitchen. Now, in some relationships, the woman is clearly the leader and the man serves as a support system. That is the happy wife, happy life philosophy. And in my opinion, it works at keeping the woman satisfied, but the man is usually internalizing his feelings and ultimately ends up cheating in order to find some sort of happiness. But let's move on to these blind dates. Kenny is the first to go on his blind date, and his date Myasia arrives to take him out. My first impression of Myasia is that she's pretty, confident, but a little bit on the immature side. It also turns out that she used to be Shorty's intern from the morning show days, which is awkward to say the least. Kenny and Myasia go out to a restaurant, and the way that Kenny is interacting with Myasia, as opposed to his last date with Shemaya, is night and day. Kenny is engaged, he's laughing, flirting, and he's very receptive to Myasia's compliments. If there is one takeaway that I had from this date, it would be when Myasia asked Kenny about his flaws, and he responded that his biggest flaw is that he has a big heart. And in the back of my mind, I'm wondering how Myasia would react if he told her about the time he copied Shorty's bank statements and sent them to his phone, or how he spammed Shorty's work social media page just to get back at her. Those are red flags galore. As for predictions, I can see Kenny going out a second date with Myasia just to make Shorty jealous for going out on a second date with Hollywood. But I don't see Kenny going on more than 2 or 3 dates with Myasia because it would definitely cause some chaos at home with Shorty. Otis then meets his date Milan at a ranch, and they go horseback riding. My first impression of Milan is that she's pretty, she's definitely physically fit like Charlie, and she comes off as less assertive and more submissive than Charlie. The two of them ride horses, and then afterwards they sit down to drink wine. They talk and they have a number of things in common. Milan invites Otis out to her DJ event later that night, and Otis takes a minute to ponder on it, but ultimately declines. I think Otis would definitely go out on a second date with Milan, simply because that she is what he is looking for, and he would enjoy the type of peace that she would bring to his space. Dr. Nicole then meets with Shay and Alfonso to discuss their issues with trust. Here's what I learned from their discussion. Alfonso helps manage Rick Ross, and because of that, he's going to be around a lot of women. Alfonso used to be out in the streets early on in the relationship, but he seemingly has settled down with Shay. He isn't the sniper that he used to be, however, that doesn't stop women from hitting him up and crossing those boundaries. I will say that Shay brought up some great points about how Alfonso's actions, or lack thereof, make her feel. However, it is my opinion that if Alfonso wasn't bringing home the money, then Shay would have left him a long time ago. So I have to wonder if Shay is truly in love with Alfonso, or if she likes the lifestyle that he provides and she doesn't want to lose it to another woman. That's just food for thought. Before Charlie's date, Charlie and Otis talk about his date, but Otis is providing the bare minimum when it comes to giving the details, and I can see both sides of the issue. If Otis tells Charlie every single thing about the date, it might cause a rift between the two of them, and it might lead to other issues. But if Otis speaks in half-truths and neglect telling certain details, then he can temporarily avoid having to endure the pettiness and wrath of Charlie. In my opinion, if the situation is that bad, then just go your separate ways. But Charlie's date Brent arrives at the house, and my first impression was that Brent was mature, he's a nice guy, and he came in wearing a sports coat, which means that he meant business. Brent takes Charlie out to a pasta making class, they have fun and sit down to talk. Brent tells Charlie that he's running for Congress, and in my opinion, this show has had a number of interesting participants throughout the seasons, but a candidate for Congress would definitely be the first of its kind. But he and Charlie are talking, and she asks him what his thoughts are on the concepts of submission, and he replies that he doesn't like the word. He then goes on to say that he believes in equal submission, which made Charlie light up like a Christmas tree. In my opinion, a relationship can thrive and be healthy with equal submission, but I don't think Charlie wants equal anything in her relationship. I think she wants all the perks, and she wants to challenge any part that she doesn't like. Nevertheless, I think Charlie may go on a second date with Brent. For the last date of the episode, Shorty goes on her second date with Hollywood. They go to a restaurant, they have polite conversation, and this date was the highlight of the night. And here's why. First, Shorty tells Hollywood that she tried to break up with Kenny several times, and it didn't work. And in the back of my mind, I'm wondering, how do you fail to break up with somebody? Then Shorty explains how. She explains that after breaking up with Kenny, he showed up at her new place unexpectedly. And with that, along with Kenny's other actions in the last episode, I'm convinced that Shorty is a pure fool, and she deserves the dysfunction that she is getting with Kenny. But over the remainder of the date with Shorty and Hollywood was simply laying it on thick while trying to encourage Shorty to leave Kenny and trying to convince Shorty that he was a born-again Christian. Give me a break. The episode ends with the couples meeting back with Dr. Nicole and discussing their dates. Unfortunately, we only get to see Otis talking about his date with Milan before the episode ends. And there was some conflict between Otis and Charlie because Otis told Dr. Nicole the details of his date with Milan and he didn't tell Charlie. And as a result, Charlie tried to paint herself as the victim, and she deliberately used the word scold to describe what Otis does to her. Otis took offense to this, and I can see where Otis is coming from. In my opinion, when a woman tells the world that a man has scolded her, that usually suggests that a man doesn't respect her, and he has the propensity to be abusive. So this causes a long, drawn-out argument between the two of them, and Dr. Nicole ultimately sides with Charlie because it's the popular thing to do. But overall, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'll give this episode a 6. It was entertaining, there's plenty of hidden gems for people out there suffering from problems in their own relationships, and there are plenty of jaw-dropping moments. But with that comes the end of the review, and I am proud to keep my promise of posting a quality review in less than 10 minutes for you. If you have any questions or comments about the review or the episode, feel free to post them below in the comment section, and I'll reply to each and every comment. Until next time, stay tuned and stay safe. Peace.